Hi, and welcome to another episode of Loremaker's Guide to the Galaxy. My name's Adam Weezer. I'm associate writer here at the LA studio. And for those of you who've never seen an episode of this show, it's basically a chance for one of the members of the lore team to sit down, give you a personal tour of a system that you'll be seeing in Star Citizen and possibly Squadron 42. So today, as always, we start here on Earth, looking at the beautiful planet rotating here on the star map. And we're not actually going to go too far to start this episode, because the story of this system actually begins here on Earth. So if we back up a little bit, we are going to see out here in the distance this jump point to Sol and Croshaw. Now this was monumentally important for the history of humanity, because this was the first jump, as you see, I'll back up the star map here, that we ever took to leave our system into someplace else. So if we go back to Sol here, basically as humanity started to explore space in the Sol system, there were certain people that, as we terraformed Mars, we got people there, but people started going further and further out into the reaches of our own system, and people way out here in this one little corner started to disappear for reasons that were unknown by everybody. This became known as the Neso Triangle, which obviously was inspired by the Bermuda Triangle to a certain degree, a strange space anomaly that seemed to make ships disappear. So at the most famous of one of the many ships that this happened to was a ship called the Goodman, which headed out in this direction and disappeared in this slot right here. But we'll talk a little bit more about the fate of the Goodman later on. But for 10 plus years, a scientist by the name of Nick Croshaw studied what exactly was going in this neighborhood of the solar system, what anomaly was happening. And after much hard work in 2271, he finally figured something out, fired up his ship, and did the first successful traversal to and from the Croshaw system. Now this little part is important because Croshaw is considered the first nav jumper, the first one to ever make the jump to the Croshaw system. But based on the evidence and the entire myth of the Neso Triangle, that's not true. He's just the first person to have ever done the jump both there and then successfully made the jump on back. So let's go right to the jump point here so you can see the fun little star map animation we have that shows us off. And here we are into the Croshaw system. Again, he first found this in 2271, and when this happened, it was obviously a monumental feat for humanity. It was also something that we weren't exactly ready for, because we had terraformed Mars, like I said earlier, but expanding into a whole other system, especially one where you had to come through such a dangerous jump point, something that back when Nick Croshaw first did it, there wasn't any computer assistance on getting through these things. It was all by hand, very kind of like unnerving flying to be able to successfully navigate this back and forth. Now what this meant for the development of the Croshaw system was that it was in chaos for decades, because people weren't quite sure what we could do there or how we could consistently get food or supplies or even people into there. Going through a jump point at this point from Sol to Croshaw was a huge danger and a huge feat that kind of bred its own breed of pilots at the time, which came to be known as jumpers, these daredevils who were willing to take the risk of dying every single time they piloted a craft through the jump point to the system. Now, obviously, humanity wanted to expand into this area, and we had come together to terraform Mars, but there wasn't really any bylaws as to what we would do if a new system was discovered. There were companies, there were even some countries that tried to rush in here to come in and terraform planets in the Croshaw system, but unfortunately that was very expensive, and like I said, that's because it was very dangerous. Many people's fortunes were lost trying to be the first ones to really claim a new planet for themselves. It wasn't really until the world got together in a world summit and came up with something called the Freeman Act. Now what this was, it was the world coming together to say that we want to terraform, in particular, Angeli, the second planet in the Croshaw system, but it's so expensive to do that, we need to basically be able to finance this. And the way they did that is by selling one-way tickets into the system for people who would eventually want to live there. Now this was a way that somebody could, invest in humanity's future and also go spend the rest of their years on an alien world. So that was really the only way humanity was able to get the funds together, to pull them together and really terraform this planet. Now these world summits all came together to head in 2380 when the world summit broke under the announcement that the United Nations of Earth was created. It was the first global government system that was really put in place. It turned into the UPE and eventually what we're now in 2947, which is the UEE. So this was the first impetus for that, and that was in 2830. And that really opened up what has become known in history books as the universal era of humanity, where humanity finally got out of this one system and started to expand. Because once we figured out how to successfully navigate jump points, how to replicate that, and then eventually once the jump drives took over and really made this easier, humanity's expansion into the stars was actually pretty lightning quick past that. Now let's get into some of the quick details here. Now we've got at the center, this is a type G main sequence star, yellow, white, and brightness. It's smaller than the sun at the center of our system. It's like 0.89% of the mass, and it's not as bright. It's 0.67 luminosity compared to our sun. But still, it means it has a tighter green zone, which did factor into its development a little bit, because it didn't really extend out far enough to get all the, as many planets as they would have dreamed of or hoped of. Croshaw 1, which is the first one right in here, is a terrestrial smog planet. This has beautiful kind of like yellow and orange clouds that swirl around. It makes for a very scenic thing, but it also makes for a very corrosive and deadly atmosphere. So it's not something that you're going to want to go flying your ship into unless you're going to face the consequences of going into such an atmosphere. Croshaw 2 was really the crown jewel of the system. This was what drove everyone to get there as soon as possible to try to terraform this place. It was named Angeli, and it's just a naturally beautiful world that we needed to terraform to be able to make it habitable for humanity. There are dangers for earthquakes here, severe dangers that have been noted since the very beginning of the terraformation. And because of this, a lot of the construction, a lot of the history of the planet was thought of in this way. Buildings there have to be built to very strict codes, including mass-tuned dampers, to make sure that if and when the big one ever does strike, that the buildings will be as safe and secure as possible for the population. Now, this is something that is well known about the planet, but it's never happened since we have called it a home for humanity. So to be quite honest, a lot of the residents are pretty blasé and kind of keep this danger of this planet in the back of their mind. One of the other things that affected this is that mining was also restricted on Angeli because they were worried that pulling out too much of the ore and the bedrock and everything around this planet might make it unstable and lead to worse tremors somewhere down the line. A very interesting culture developed here over the years because it was humanity's really first home in another system. People from all over came here. It was a real melting pot of cultures and culinary cuisine and everything like that. Buyumbo is a kind of like thick stew with either meat or seafood. That's kind of the well-known dish that came from Angeli here. And there's a lot of history that happened here. There's a few things in particular that are worth pointing out for their significance and their impact on the rest of the empire. In 2781, Messer X went to Angeli to basically see the opening of the Chanos Stadium, which was this massive kind of like public work. It was going to be his legacy, the place that he wanted people to look at and think of him for years and years to come. And he taxed the people of Angeli so high, pissed off a lot of people. Just, it was a despotic, very controlling person, but this was going to be his legacy. Well, on the day that this stadium basically opened to the public, a massive series of bombings went off around the stadium, completely destroying it, killing the thousands that were inside. Messer X was then pursued by these radicals through the streets and eventually killed right then and there. His son, Linton Messer, then ascended to power right after. He would end up being the very last Messer in the lesser line. This was right on the tail end of the Messer's control of the UEE. But history books have since discovered that Linton Messer and his sister, Fiona Messer, actually both planned this attack on their father, on Angeli, killing thousands of people as a way to basically depose him of power and assume control for themselves. Another thing worth pointing out is that in 2884, Dr. Russell Vallum decided to come to Croshaw and to Angeli in particular to show off what he thought was going to be the next big leap in scientific technology. He felt like humanity had kind of been stunted in where they are ever since Croshaw made that first jump into the system. So as a way to show off his speed of light travel engine that he had built, he brought everyone here, he brought in newspapers, everything to observe his first flight in the skies over Angeli. His engine exploded, obliterating him and the entire ship. And ever since then, nobody's attempted speed of light travel because of the dangers that popped up in this situation. Another fun little fact about Angeli here is that this is where Traveler's Day first started in 2905. Traveler's Day is just a day where people come together and celebrate where they have been over the past year throughout the Empire. It's a cultural, it's got a kind of like significant event. It also kind of brings this planet into planet-wide celebration since the first one happened here. And in 2937, someone decided to take advantage of the celebrations and the fun and all the visitors that come here on Traveler's Day. And in 2937, there was a massive heist of Angeli aged whiskey from different distilleries around the planet. Now, for some reason, nobody's quite sure what the whiskey aged on Angeli is particularly good and coveted by people all around the Empire. So this, even though there were just massive casks of whiskey stolen from these distilleries, tons and tons of credits disappeared on that day. Who knows where they ended up on the black market. But if you're ever in the verse and you see some Angeli aged whiskey, that's the real good stuff. You don't want to toss that out. You want to hold on to that. So moving on, we are going to slide right over here to Van. This is the third planet in the system. And it's, let me back it up a little bit, but as you can see, it's kind of on the, it's supposed to be on the edge of the green zone. This is one of the things in the star map we will be correcting because this is a very cold planet. It's one of those that if this wasn't the first system humanity went to, we might not have even terraformed it because it is bitterly, bitterly cold here. Think like the top of Alaska or Norway, Siberia-esque landscape all around this planet. But since it was only the second one here that in the system that we jumped into, we decided to do something with it anyways. Now, just for your reference, like I said, it's supposed to be in the very edge of the green zone, and we've worked with people to figure out the exact numbers on this. The green band extends to 1.41 AU in this system, and Van's average orbital radius sits at 1.33 AU. So just to give you a little idea of how into the details we get on exactly the placement of these planets. What happened to Van is it became a bit of a commodities hub. It's a terrestrial planet. Since there wasn't allowed mining on Angeli, there was a bunch of mining here. A lot of different, there's some asteroid belts we'll talk about in a second. A lot of that stuff came through Van here. But it was always very cold. It built up these bigger cities because it was really the only other place to live on the planet. But as humanity expanded, took over more systems, built better places for people to live, the population shrunk. So there's a lot of abandoned buildings on the edge of the city here. There's just a lot of like dead space. An artist community has moved in and taken over. Some are squatting in a lot of these old abandoned buildings to do large visual art pieces. There's a movement, art movement there called the Squadron movement, which is very minimalistic paintings with these very bright colors and negative white space that reflect the white snow-covered planet. And the most notable feature which the Squadron movement pulls in is the auroras that appear in the sky above Van are just beautiful. Just these almost like curtains of color that fall down over the sky at certain times of the season. So it's a beautiful place to go, but it's not some place you want to get caught outside without a jacket on, that's for sure, because you won't last too long. Now we move on out to the fourth planet in the system. We go here. This is Croshaw 4. This is the last one. It is a super Earth. It is rocky. It has no atmosphere, and all the resources have been pulled from it since humanity basically started in the system and just went at it. So the most interesting thing about this outer part of the system, because Croshaw 4 is a little boring, are the two asteroid clusters that sit in the Lagrange points right here. You've got the Icarus Cluster, and you've got the Daldis cluster right here. Now, Icarus is of particular interest if we move on in, because even though this is one of the first asteroid clusters that humanity has been mining over and over and over, it still has some surprises inside of it. A few years ago, there was a miner that was out there working a certain group of asteroids and found an old distress beacon dislodged into the side of it. It had been there for hundreds of years. After a bunch of detective work and going on some visits to museums and talking to different scientists and archaeologists, they discovered that this distress beacon actually came from the Goodman, one of the ships that was notorious for disappearing through the Neso Triangle. Based on the coordinates that they found on the beacon in the Icarus cluster here, they were able to track and find the Goodman just floating in the black of the Croshaw system, and were able to recover it and take it to the Museo Museum in Angeli to show off. Which is just an incredible find and a showcase that even though certain parts of this empire, certain parts of the UEE have been explored and searched over by humanity for centuries, there are still secrets to be discovered in the universe of Star Citizen. So that's a really quick tour of the Croshaw system, the first system outside of Sol that humanity ever called home. I'm sure all of you will be visiting it at some point. It should make for some interesting experiences here, as it's one of only, as you can see here, one of only two systems that connects to the Sol system. So if you'll be visiting Earth or Mars at any point in the game, you'll either be passing through Croshaw or Davian on the way there. I'm Adam Weezer. Thanks for watching another edition of Loremaker's Guide to the Galaxy, and yeah, we'll see you around the verse.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.